I suppose first order of business is probably that our panelists should introduce ourselves. Since I'm already talking, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. For those of you who don't know, although I've been speaking at every meeting this so far, so you probably heard my voice before. I'm Nathan, Nathan Lachner. I'm the SPS president here at Ohio State University. I'm not currently participating in any research. Running this club and being on top of my classwork is kind of work enough for me at the moment, although I'm trying to figure out where I might want to go next. But I used to do research in condensed matter. They both start with C. I'm tired. Condensed matter physics with Dr. Jay Gupta and his aptly titled Gupta group. So I left that group back in March, but I was there for about a year and a half.
All right. So I guess I'll go next. I'm Joey. I'm the president of Sigma Pi Sigma, and I've done 2 years of research in Dr. Kawakami's group, Experimental Condensed Matter. I've done work mainly in 2D materials, 2D magnets, and photoconductivity.
All right, I'll go next. I'm Jay, and I'm sort of different from the typical physics crowd. I'm a math research person. I've done research with Dr. Shmutov in the math department about knot theory for, like, I guess a summer and a little bit. Yep.
All right. I'm Sam. I'm a 4th year physics and math student. My research is specifically in experimental high energy physics. I work on the Atlas experiment on the Large Hadron Collider. Specifically, this past summer, I worked on compression techniques using neural networks. I've also done some other your traditional physics analysis work as well for Atlas. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So for those of you who don't know how exactly this is going to work, this is a panel format. So ultimately speaking, we're interested in answering your guys' questions about, what research is like, how to get into research, all of that fun stuff, really anything you might be curious about as pertains to condensed matter, which is the study of anything that isn't a gas. Really, I love that. We all get relegated into one field. It's very rich and diverse, which is why, Joey and I are here. We work in 2 groups which work deeply closely together, and yet the 2 of us have done completely different things. That should give you an idea of sort of the breadth of this field. We also wanted to get, math research representation with Jay, and Sam is obviously in computational high energy particle. So he's one of the people who does get to work with gases.
Gases is too many things to work with. We get like 2 particles. Three's a bit too much.
Yes, the quantum 3-body problem. At any rate. Yeah, so I've got a few prepared questions that I figured I'd open up with to sort of give you guys some more context to direct your questions, but feel free to raise your hand on as a participants panel if you want to talk, or honestly speaking, you could just pipe up. I'll notice if you unmute your mic. And also I'll be keeping an eye on the chat if you'd rather not speak, but type. And I can ask your questions directly from there. So I guess to start off with, it's the basic question first off is, why are you doing what you're doing, and how did you get into it? And we'll start with you, Joey.
All right. So I got into what I did because I just like physics in general. So I was like, okay, I like astronomy. I like high energy. I like condensed matter. There's nothing specific that I really want to do. So I just really took the first opportunity that came my way. I emailed a handful of professors, and one of them seemed really interested to meet me, which that person was Dr. Kawakami. And I went to his office, we talked about his research, and it just sounded really cool. Because really at that level of physics, a lot of things sound really cool. So really, it's the first opportunity I got, and I did research in that group. I still do, and I don't regret it. It's definitely really cool, really interesting, and I learned. I don't plan on going into condensed matter for grad school. However, I learned a lot, and I definitely found it very useful.
Jay?
All right. I initially was coming in as just a physics major, but I soon discovered that I really do enjoy math, and I guess I like to say I'm a mathematician in the closet. Uh, so either way, I mean, I'm still a double major, but at some point I wasn't really interested in any of the experimental research that was really available to me at that time. So I looked to the math department, and Dr. Shmutov does this every summer. He does knots and graphs, which is a program about knot theory and graph theory. Who would have guessed it? And so I applied. I just sent an email. He's always looking for undergrads, so he just replied really quickly, and voila, I have research.
Sam?
So I kind of knew coming into undergrad I wanted to work in particle physics, high energy physics. It's like the sexiest field, right? Understanding how the world works on its smallest scales. So I kind of knew I wanted to do that. I didn't know experimental theory. I shadowed Chris Hill. I'm from Columbus, so I got really lucky and was able to shadow Chris Hill, who works on CMS during high school, and was like, oh, this is cool. This is what I want to do. So I got here, the thing is like do research, and then it took me until my second year to do research. And like most of this, especially now, it's email blasting. So like one of my roommates, Ari, he was nice, and like would actually go around and speak to professors. I'm not as outgoing, but so I emailed Antonio Bovia, who works on Atlas here. He's kind of like the only like regular, like normal professor on Atlas here, like doing what most professors who work on Atlas do. And I got really lucky because he said yes, like immediately, or we met and then was like, yeah. You'll hear plenty of students, I think, especially now, who are like, I sent out 40 emails and didn't hear back. It's like, yeah. Another thing, I had talked to, well, he's not here anymore, Dr. Perry, about, I was interested in theory at the time, still sort of am. So I was like, hey, I want to do high energy or nuclear theory as an undergrad. How do I do that? And he went through and was able to like be like, talk to this professor. Now in those fields specifically, as an undergrad, it's nearly non-existent. But definitely take advantage of the professors that like I see quite a few Kill Cup students in here, which means you're probably also in 2095. Talk to Lindsay. Like literally, Lindsay is the most useful person in the physics department by like a country mile. Like any question you have, Lindsay will pretty much be able to answer. So if you're like, hey, I want to do condensed theory, who should I talk to? She'll list like every professor and what they do and how willing they are to take undergrads. So yeah, I guess I might be getting a bit ahead of the curve here. But yeah, email. Long story short.
Yeah, and my research story is probably the weirdest here. So my tail end of my sophomore year, I was approached by a previous student, Stephen Gant, who worked for Gupta's group doing what's called density functional theory, which is essentially, a lot of you probably haven't taken quantum yet, if most of you are in 2300, but essentially density functional theory tries to represent properties of a condensed matter system as functions or functionals of the electron density. So you're trying to write everything in terms of the electron density, so that you could just feed that into a supercomputer, do a bunch of really complex math, and get a model for what a solid looks like that's even close to reasonable. It's kind of in its infancy. It's probably maybe 20, 25 years old. Stephen was doing it at like a very basic level here at Ohio State. He goes to UC Berkeley now. I don't know if he continued on doing that, but He's definitely still in computational, which is where he wanted to be. But he approached me and was like, hey, I know your interests. I'm going to leave. Gupta's going to have an opening. Would you like to replace me? And as I was looking for research at the time, I said yes. Fun fact is, I didn't actually end up doing density functional theory like Stephen did. The math was beyond me, and at that time, I just wasn't in a place where I had a lot of free time to dive into a new theory. And so I ended up instead working on more experimental stuff in Gupta's group, which is fine because it's an experimental group. So my first summer, I spent working on this vacuum chamber, ordering all the parts, contacting all the companies, putting the thing together, testing it, taking it apart, figuring why it didn't work, putting it back together, noticing that it still didn't work, taking it back apart. I spent a whole summer working on this extra, you're basically assembling from spare parts this extra vacuum chamber, because vacuum chambers are necessary to do the kind of work that Joey and I do. Surfaces get screwed up when they're in atmospheric pressure. It takes like a nanosecond before they're completely covered in oxygen and nitrogen, and you can't see what's on them anymore. But to cut a long story short, from there I moved to doing what's called tip etching, which is, I could talk more about if anyone's interested, but it has to do with scanning tunneling microscopes and the production of tips. And the reason I ended up leaving Dr. Gupta's group is because ultimately, after about a year and a half there, I realized that it just wasn't what I wanted to be doing. A lot of the ideas of condensed matter physics, like Joey talked about, are really cool. The day-to-day work of it is just not something I enjoyed, which is, I guess, a little bit parallel to Jay's story, where he noticed that physics wasn't really for him. I'm noticing that experimental isn't really for me. But as I've gone through classes, I'm looking at more computational stuff like what Sam does, and also more theoretical stuff like what I can't yet understand. Samir Mater does black hole string theory, which sounds cool. However, if I were to show you how far above my head that was, I would need probably like 1,000 of these arms. So yeah, that's sort of my journey through group to group. No ill will on that group. It was an amazing group, amazing experience, great people. Just the work wasn't for me, which is important. You got to learn those things.
I'm gonna hop in here. So one thing that is very important, and probably the most useful thing you can learn as an undergrad doing research, is whether or not you want to actually do it. I like most students, I think entered undergrad wanting to be tenure track faculty members. I still tell myself that's what I want to do. And to become one of those, it's all research. You get into grad school, you take a few years of classes, and then the remaining 4 years or so is spent just doing research. So undergrad research is the time to figure out if research is what you like, if that's what you enjoy doing. So it's very normal to do one field, like Nathan, and be like, this isn't what I want to do, and bounce around, or it's very, or even just be like, I'm not interested in research. Research is a very specific task, requires a certain set of skills. You're doing a certain thing. It's not for everybody. And I don't want this to be like gatekeeping. Like it, just some people don't enjoy doing that, and that's okay. It's a lot better to know that during your bachelor's than halfway through your PhD.
Yeah, I don't think it's, it's not that, there's some weird uncontrollable aspect of yourself that determines whether or not you'll be good at research. It's if you do it and you don't like it, that's okay. I'm actually thinking about maybe pivoting into something more philosophy oriented. There's a subfield of philosophy called philosophy of science, and there's a subfield of that called philosophy of physics, which deals with how physics impacts the way we think about metaphysical and epistemological questions, like what is the universe at more than just a physical level, that's metaphysics, and epistemology, what can we know about it? because quantum mechanics really introduces weirdness there, and you have to like have a deep understanding of the math to do that, which means you kind of have to have a physics bachelor's degree. So it made me well suited for that, and I like philosophy. So you don't have to end up doing physics research to still end up doing something interesting with this degree. You just got to figure out where to pivot, which means you got to explore and not be scared to switch. I honestly should have probably tried to quit the group to group earlier than I did, just because I was like, well, I don't know. I waffled back and forth, and that in retrospect, I know why I did that, and don't blame myself for it, but I did. Does anyone have any questions knowing that basic background? I don't see anything in the chat, but I'll give people a few minutes to think and pipe, or a few seconds. Somewhere between a few seconds and a few minutes.
Yeah, actually, I think you kind of brought up a question that I had maybe. So at the beginning of the year, I kind of expected that I'd be going home because I'm living on campus right now. So I emailed some professors at like local universities and stuff. And I ended up getting a research position, which is really awesome. But I haven't really had any time to do anything with it because Kilcup's kept me pretty busy amongst other things.
He does do that.
So I guess I'm just wondering, if it turns out that I don't like this research in the future, like once I get started and like get into it, how do you like quit? Like how do you get out of it? I guess is what I want to know.
Yeah, directed at me. Okay, good, because I like the sound of my own voice too much. But yeah, no, that's actually a really important question. It is gonna feel, especially going into it, it's gonna feel awkward. There's no way about it. Especially, because Dr. Gupta was paying me at that point, so it was like I was quitting a job. And it also, like, I decided to quit like right as COVID hit, so lots of complexities along there, which made it impossible to wrap up whatever I was working on, because I wasn't allowed back in the lab to finish what I was doing. Otherwise I would have gone and done like a week's worth of work to wrap things up, label things, write documentation, and leave. But as things stand, I just had to I've ended up leaving a lot of that stuff outstanding just because I couldn't go in. But to the actual question of how do you start that conversation, most professors, if they're worth having as mentors, they will understand that not every field is for every person. And more importantly, from the perspective of the professor, they want students in their group, be they undergraduates, graduates, postdocs, research scientists, other professors, if you've got a joint group going on, whatever, that are really interested in what's going on, because when people are passionate, they do they invest more time, they do more work, and it's better for the group. It also helps to facilitate, camaraderie among the researchers, which is really valuable for keeping morale up when something breaks. And in experimental science, stuff breaks a lot. Like I said, I spent a whole summer essentially fixing a pump. A very expensive pump, but a pump. So you just talk. You just send an email like, hey, I'm thinking that this isn't for me. And they'll get it. And generally speaking, as long as you get that out there, they'll be like, they will either ask, or you can say, I'm thinking this isn't for me. I'm not sure I want to be doing this whenever I want to explore other options. What do I need to do to square away my responsibilities for the research group so that I can go and pivot in these other directions? And in a certain respect, you should also feel free to, if you have something about your research that you like doing that the rest didn't appeal to you, feel free to ask. Be like, hey, I liked this, but I like this 20% of what we did, but this 80% wasn't for me. Do you have any recommendations for where I could go to fulfill this 20%? And hopefully they'll have an answer for you. Sometimes they won't. Professors aren't omniscient, but they might have an answer. So that's what I'd recommend, is just don't be afraid to just say, hey, I'm not enjoying this as much anymore, because people want you to be interested. They want interested students as much as you want to be interested in your work. Like, that's just a common interest.
Yeah, I'll chime in a tiny bit. I don't have this experience. Especially in experimental groups, they're usually a lot bigger. So if you're doing electronics on your one group and in this group, and you're like, this sucks, can I do data analysis? Or I've liked the data analysis that I do, and you talk to your PI about that, they'll usually be like, oh yeah, okay, cool. You want to do data analysis? Like, we can find work for you. Also, I think it's important to realize in this, like, I'd say a decent fraction, like probably close to half of the professors you meet have gone through this exact same thing, whether an undergrad or grad. So like, don't be like, oh, nobody, like most professors have gone through a research experience, have been like, I don't want to do this, and that's okay. It's okay. Yeah, that's my little.
Yeah, I wanted to add something to that as well. So for undergrad research, I don't think people should look at it as a job, because some people think, oh, it's a job. I go in, I do my work, I contribute to the group, and I leave, and I may or may not get paid. I don't think that's a good mentality. I think it's more of like a mentorship program and a learning program, because the professor's not there to just use you to get some work done that other people don't want to do.
That's what grad students are for.
Yeah. Instead, they want to mentor you because you're young, you don't know what you want to do in physics, if you want to even stay in physics. So they're there to show you what research is like and talk to you and help you understand if this is something you like or if you want to go do something else. So it's more a mentorship problem or mentorship program rather than just some job.
All right, thanks guys, appreciate it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I think Sam brought it up about kind of students sending out, 30, 40 emails to these professors and trying to figure out, which ones are going to reply back to them and everything. How do you know which of these professors are kind of looking for undergrads? Is it worth it to, whatever one you're interested in, kind of send out personalized emails to everybody, or is it worthwhile to maybe check with the advisor and kind of see if they know anybody in the department?
Yeah, so like, first thing is seriously, like, Lindsay's my advisor. If I'm sure David is similar if you're an Astro.
Yeah, physics and Astro.
Okay, sure. Email them, and they'll be like, yeah, yeah, Bovia takes undergrads. Samir Mathur doesn't really, so go to Lindsay and be like, hey, I'm interested in experimental high energy physics or computational astrophysics or whatever your interest is in. Do that. I mean, 30 to 40 emails is a bit of an exaggeration. There's, I think, only 60 faculty between the physics and astronomy departments here. So, you don't have to write that many. So usually they are a little personalized. Especially if you go to meet. The question that I was horrifically prepared for was, why do you want to work with me? Have that answer. That's a good one. It shows that you have read. You don't even have to read their papers, because more than likely, like, I don't know, I've been working on Atlas for 2 years, and most Atlas papers make no sense. If you find their CV and read the introduction and the abstract to a few of their articles and kind of get an idea of what they're doing, that's usually sufficient. Yeah, doing that research beforehand is a good idea. it can be hard, especially if you haven't done research or don't know a lot of like current like what is big topics in research to kind of like know, but that's okay. Again, this is why we bounce between groups. So yeah, like email Lindsay. She'll be or David, and she'll be like, okay, or, you know, they'll be like, all right, here's kind of a good list. You know, if you're interested in this, these professors usually take undergrads, these don't. Then you write them an email. Usually you don't. It's actually a shame. Liam has had quite the experience getting into his group. He works for Dr. Gautier and Lafayette in quantum information, and he had to badger Gautier for like a year to start working for him. So persistence isn't bad. Don't email him every day, but yeah, talk to your advisor, kind of read their read the professors you're interested in, like, you know, kind of at least have some idea. Yeah, I mean, you should expect to like not hear back. Professors are notoriously awful at email, right? So it's just part of it. Yeah, but definitely like first step, talk to your advisor. That is honestly the one thing being in physics that I have really come to appreciate about this department is like their advising is absolutely insane, like so good. Like I remember being a freshman and like not liking emailing Lindsay because she would like answer my question like in a sentence, and then I'd be like, oh, I feel like an idiot for not knowing this, you know, like seriously, like yeah, email your advisor. And then yeah, personalized emails always good, because at some point like they're gonna want to know, you know. Yeah, especially when you're starting out as an undergrad, especially if you haven't done research before. There's a lot of what's the right you're like not gonna be doing net positive work for the group for a few months. Even like, you know, unless if you're really good at coding already and then hop into pure coding, you're going to spend a lot of your time asking grad students for help, asking postdocs, asking your PI if you're lucky. So it's very normal. So that's also part of it, right? Like they understand that first few months you're not going to be contributing a ton, which is okay. Like that's why you're doing it, is to learn so that you can. But that is part of their calculus. Yeah, email your advisor, personalized emails, and just send them out. Like, yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
No, yeah, that definitely helps a lot. I appreciate that. Do you think it's like too late to send these emails already, you know, a quarter of the way through the semester, or kind of groups looking for?
No, the only thing, because the thing is like research by and large does not follow semesters, quarters.
Gotcha.
It's just a continuous thing. The only difference is like if you email them a few weeks before classes start, they're probably a little bit less busy. But like otherwise, I started, like, for instance, I think I sent my email to work with Dr. Bavia like end of October, and by mid-November was working for him. So like totally normal to start working during the semester, especially because like you know, if you're a KilCup student and you're like, oh, I'll have time to do research, and then a month into KilCup you're like, I really don't have time to do this, you know, that's not great. So yeah, nothing at all wrong with sending emails now.
Awesome, that definitely helps a lot.
Great.
I'd also like to note that most professors have personal websites for their research groups. You want to know what they do, you want to know about the professor, you want to know where they studied, you want to know what projects they're working on, you want links to their papers, go check their websites. They'll have all that. In fact, and it's annoying that we can't be in the PRB right now. But if you wanted to go an experimental, most of the experimental groups hang their best research posters on the walls in the hallway. Especially the condensed matter groups in the basement do this. They get nice laminated copies of their posters, so that you can go read about the work they did. And it's just, it gives you a nice cursory overview of what they do, and you could just sort of wander from place to place. It's also a great way to figure out what parts of the building belong to which subjects, because it's really hard to tell when all the doors say keep out, laser on, do not enter, you will die. But yeah, definitely go check out professors' websites right now if you can. Most of them have a website or a personal page linked on the faculty page, which lists relevant information. And also, secret tip, most of them also have a part of the day they dedicate to answering emails. If you could get a hold of one of their grad students who knows that, it's a secret way in. Because, for example, Dr. Gupta, I learned, answered his emails between 8 and 10 in the morning. So even when I was in his research group, if I needed to get a hold of him, I would schedule I could write the email whenever I want, but I scheduled it to send to him at 8 in the morning, and I'd get a prompt reply. Otherwise, I might have to wait a week because it would get buried by the 50 emails he gets in a day. Something I am now viscerally learning from the other end what that is like. But yeah, so definitely see if you can't figure out those timings. That's one of the secret tips I learned. Not all professors do that, but in general, their grad students, if you can get a hold of their emails, are a little easier to contact.
Yeah, I guess going back to, how do you get involved? If there's a professor that you have in class that you like, one, it helps if you do well in that class. Two, get to know them. And, usually that's a good interview, right? If they know that you can take integrals or whatever, they're probably going to be a bit more likely to let you play on their $100,000 laser or whatever.
Or a $20,000 scanning electron microscope. Actually, it's more like $50,000. God, I cringe every time I think about the fact that I was let anywhere near that device. Yeah, any other questions? Unless Joey or Jay, you have something to add to that. I know Sam and I just kind of went all gung-ho. Okay. Does anyone else, any other questions?
I was kind of curious what your guys' research was like this semester with everything that's been going on.
I can answer that really easily. I'm not doing any. Which is to say, my current research project is running this club. But I know you guys are.
So I was actually incredibly lucky with this. So all of my work is software. And so because CERN is the behemoth that it is, it has to be set up to work remotely. You have to it has to be set up that you can operate it anywhere in the world. So really the only difference was that our meetings, which were already hosted online for some of the members of our group in Geneva, moved completely online. And then instead of logging into the computing server I did my work on and the PRB, I did it in my bedroom. So that's one. I've luckily not had issues getting access to labs or things like that. So my work is actually almost entirely unaffected. My internet is a bit worse than the PRBs, but that's, I think, probably the largest change.
I'd like to add, so the advantage of doing theoretical research is that you don't have to work with, anything physical, right? So you can usually schedule things so that you can delegate your work and then have it be done remote. It's not like someone has to watch you do something. Let's say you're in a lab, you're fixing something, someone has to be there to make sure you don't just put the screw in the wrong hole or something and it explodes. Yeah, so in general, in theoretical research, you get this advantage where you can do things remotely. And I think even not during COVID time, you can easily convince your PI to do things remotely, which is, I guess, a reason to consider theoretical research.
Or experimental high energy.
Yeah, same. At some level.
Well, as an experimentalist in condensed matter, I do all of my work in the lab. So I work with my hands a lot, and you can't do that with COVID. You have to fill out all this paperwork to gain access to the PRB, which they're very strict with undergrads because we are not required to be there like, a PhD student. So I've done nothing.
Yeah. For reference, I can also attest to the fact that I know the group to group has this set up where they can run their scanning tunneling microscopes, which are their primary. That's what the experimental group focuses on, is this specific measurement technique. And then their papers are about various things they do with it, but it's using this measurement technique. And they have that set up. They can remote desktop into that. So I know a lot of them, they're just remote desktop. They're just accessing things remote desktop. Other things you can do in experimental is you go off and you just start building models in Mathematica, or you just go read papers for 4 months. You could also just go read papers for 4 months. You could come back and have such a solid understanding of what you're working on, rather than the oftentimes shaky feeling foundation it is that you operate on most of the time. And Liam, who again isn't here, is actually one of the rare undergraduates who has gotten access back to the PRB to do his research. But I also know that he's been working on projects that he can do at home. So he took the equipment home and is actually working on the equipment at home, because it's a small little circuit board that he's working on. So he could just take that home and work on it there, because his research is heavily focused on, base level electronics work and designing logic circuits and wiring up things. And he's a code monkey and cable monkey, which is great in most experimental groups. You need someone who can build all your tech for you, because the companies that will build it and charge you for it will charge you truly insane prices for it. For reference, that pump I spent a summer fixing was $5,000. Just by fixing it. My entire cost of work for that summer was cheaper than just replacing the pump. And that's just the physical unit. That's not including the computer to control it, which is another $3,000. But of course it has to be a $5,000 pump. It spins at 1,000 rotations a second, I think, or something like that. Turbomolecular pumps are insane. So yeah, but that's a little off track. The point I'm making is that a lot of experimental groups have transitioned to doing modeling, remote work. I'm tired, forgive me. It was a long night last night getting some stuff done.
I assume this is probably written in one of your questions. Please also, if somebody has another question, please hop in. I think it's important to talk about what our day-to-day stuff looks like. It's very easy for me to talk about particle physics and neural networks and stuff, but like most days is like banging my head against Python. Like it's a lot. It's almost entirely coding. Actually, my work is entirely coding. I remember being a freshman and being like, coding this sucks. But like actually coding's the coolest thing. Just absurdly powerful. Learn Python. Rule 1, learn Python if you want to do physics. So I guess if you guys want to go through your like what's your day-to-day work. All right, let's see you, Calvin. Feel free to email us any questions. my day-to-day work, primarily banging my head against Python. Sometimes I'll go to meetings, read papers, but mostly just coding.
I'll also like add to that. I guess I don't know. I don't know if anyone cares about math research, but if you do, then I would like to comment. Yeah, knowing coding is also just as important for math research, because in general, like even if you're doing like very abstract things that you can't picture or think about, there is some like usually some finite small thing that you can do on a computer to model it and sort of understand the structure, maybe visually, or some other sort of medium. So typically, I've gotten, I've been introduced to something and I'm having a lot of trouble working with it. And many people in the group will either come together to make a simulation or some sort of calculator that would calculate basic things about it or whatnot. So like that skill is really important because a lot of people, turns out in my group, don't know how to code. And so they were struggling a lot with everything. Meanwhile, I had Python experience, so I was having a much better time with figuring out what's going on from the abstract, very like high level stuff, which is inevitable in math.
Yeah, so for me, my day to day was a lot more variable. So being in experimental physics rather than coding a bunch, even though a lot of experimentalists do code a lot, coding is just universal in all of physics. You can't escape it. If you really hate coding, don't do physics. So,
Or join a
but
group that already
luckily,
has a coder.
yeah, you could probably do that. But luckily, I do zero coding. I don't hate coding, I just don't love it. And I do zero coding. I work with my hands mostly, and day by day, it differs depending on what we need that day, what needs to be fixed, because things break a lot, and what project we're working on, et cetera, et cetera. So it could be fixing like a pump, like Nathan said. It could be assembling electronics, wires, and all that for a new device. It could be troubleshooting some other machine that just doesn't want to work. But it varies a lot day to day. So a lot of problem solving and working with your hands and fixing things, and a little bit of research. And that research is finally when everything actually does work. And then you just hit the record button and just take a measurement, change the parameters, take another measurement, and do that over and over, which I think is the boring part, which is kind of funny. The actual research and data collection is the most boring part because you just hit a button and let the machines do the rest. But setting up the experiment and even fixing things that are broken sound tedious, but it's really fun to do so actually. So it depends day to day for experimental condensed matter.
In general, that's true of experiment. Like there are grad students in my group who do hardware work. It varies a lot, but yeah, experiment, you get to do a lot of cool things, a bunch of different things. It's fun.
And this is where I and Joey differ very strongly because I got very bored of the constant fixing things. Although my day-to-day in the group-to-group was spent, working on this one system, trying to get it up and running, troubleshooting it day-to-day. And then my second half of my tenure there was spent researching this tip etching process, which is an electrolytic chemical etching process that we used to produce these nanometer sharp needles. Essentially, we'd essentially etch platinum iridium wire down to nanometer sharpness, because you need that kind of sharpness to get the precise tunneling effect between the needle and the surface for a scanning tunneling microscope. And so a lot of my day-to-day was actually just coming in and running this electrolytic etching process over and over again, varying the parameters, making the tips, we call them tips, because they're at the tip of the microscope, making the tips, moving the tips around very carefully. Because when you have something that's that sharp, you're no longer allowed to touch it. It is no longer allowed to touch anything. You put it on putting it on what is called a puck for the scanning electron microscope, taking them to the scanning electron microscope, putting them in the scanning electron microscope, itself a process which takes half an hour. Looking at them under the scanning electron microscope. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you can use the properties of the scanning electron microscope to clean up the tip. You can blast lots of electrons at it and knock dust off. That's if you're lucky. Most of the time, the tips just didn't look right, and you just had to throw them away. But yes, it was just a lot of time spent doing that over day in, day out for like 2 months. I did that, and that was, like Joey said, it was a lot of press a button and wait. It was a little bit more varied than that, but that's a lot of what my group did. It was either that, or you were fixing one kind of electronic, another kind of electronic, a third kind of electronic, or a fourth kind of electronic. And that's just not what I'm into. I make it sound very tedious on account of it's not what I enjoy doing. I like thinking about numbers and equations and data and probably stuff closer to what Jay does. My roommate is a math major who does stochastic graph theory with Dr. Jim Fowler. And I actually occasionally talk to him about his research and throw ideas at him because I enjoy that more. But that's me personally. Like Joey said, it's really up to what your interests are. If you like tinkering, experimental physics is great for that. If you like, messing around with numbers and equations and figuring out how these functional properties, theoretical physics is more your speed. And if you like figuring out all the various data analysis, computational stuff, it'll probably be more like what Sam does, which is algorithm design and being a code monkey.
Yeah. So I want, there is one common thread, it seems, and all of this, which is banging your head against the wall and doing tedious processes constantly.
What tedium do you enjoy?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure if people are familiar with type 1 and type 2 fun. Type 1 fun is things I don't know. Things that we would normally call fun, like I don't know, going for a bike ride, or I guess I find that fun. Anyway, regular things we would call fun, right? Type 2 fun is not that. Type 2 fun is things that generally kind of suck. Running is a great example of type 2 fun. Research, by and large, type 2 fun. You have to accept that it is mainly composed of doing little small things, frequently incredibly frustrating for like no progress, and you have no idea. And you're working on something horrifically esoteric, okay? Like, that's just the nature of it. And it's important to like know that going in, you're gonna feel like you do nothing, and you feel like you're stupid all the time. For anybody who's will take honors E&M, we need to get Jay Prakash to speak again because he's actually the best. But he spoke 2 years ago at SPS, and the thing that stuck with me in that was like, if you're not doing something that makes you feel stupid, it's not hard enough. And a similar mantra is, if it was easy, it already would have been done. So you're in physics research, right? Like you're like, how does the world work, right? If previous people had figured that out, right? And there are some pretty damn smart people who came before us, right? They probably would have, right? So what's left is the hard stuff, right? We don't have to worry about how the moon flies around the Earth anymore, right? It's like, why do we have 6 times as much matter in the universe as we can see? That's a lot harder of a problem to solve. And that's why we do it, though. Like, you do have to want to enjoy suffering a little bit. It sucks a little bit, but it's cool. Like, you're if you can put up with the tedium of it a little bit, it's cool. I don't know. I'm a climber, so like this is a very natural analogy for me. Climbing mountains, by and large, is awful. It feels terrible the entire time. You're not sleeping, whatever, right? But you get to this objective, it's cool. yeah, most steps you take suck. It's the same in research. Most steps you're taking aren't particularly fun. This isn't like that's just part of it. Take it or leave it. But I think that's important to realize going in, is that by and large it's not this like super sexy glamorous field. You're working hard. I think it's cool. It's fun on a good day. So I think that's a little word of advice. Except especially if you want to go far, if you want to become a faculty member, you've got to work your ass off. That's just the truth. So keep that in mind. I don't want this to scare away from anybody. I love most days doing research. I think it's really cool. I like what I'm doing. It's hard. That's why we do it. That's why we do physics. If physics was easy, you probably wouldn't be here. That's just how it is. So research is the same way. Sorry, that was a little rambling, but.
No, it's okay. Keep an eye out for Sam's new book, Zen and the Art of Brick Walls, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Grind.
I don't know. Sure. That's life, right?
That's just a very stereotypical title for these sorts of things. But it is a solid point. You've got to figure out what tedium you can enjoy. For me, I like banging my head against walls made out of ideas, not walls made out of circuits or really sharp needles. I definitely do not like banging my head against walls made of really sharp needles. In hindsight, that may have been obvious. But like Joey said, he loves doing the techie stuff. And Jay, not theory, is so far above me, it's not even funny. Jay's a smart guy.
I mean, I can, if we have time after and someone wants to hear about it, I can give you like a short intro. But I doubt anyone wants to.
We could take another question. We have hit up against 7, but we could take another question.
Yeah, so for those that are still here, if you guys have more questions that come to you, please email any of us. My email is oh man, I could get the Flexer email, but I'll give you my OSU one. Roberts.1691. Feel free to ask me any questions about research or physics. I'll try to answer what I can at another time. Happy to answer questions.
Yeah, I'm Lachner.3@osu.edu. If you want to see how to spell my name, it's written underneath my picture in the camera, LACHNER.3.
You could put it in the chat, right?
Yeah, we could put it, but people could see our last names here. Incidentally, we also have an email for SPS. If you would rather contact us as a organization, that's SPS Ohio State, all one word, at gmail.com. If you would want to just email us. All of us have access to that email, so the relevant individual will be able to answer any questions you might have about research, and incidentally, the club. I should point that out too. Because there's more in physics than just research. I mean, there's people like Lindsay who do advising, and
don't forget, Lindsay took Hillcup's class. She got a degree in physics from Ohio State.
Yeah, that's why she knows the program so well.
Very well. All right.
So like, and she's fantastic for that. And also, there's Dr. Andrew Heckler, who does physics education, which is a growing field, which is not experimental or computational or theoretical, but it's all about exploring, like, how do you even begin to talk about this stuff? Because as Sam pointed out, it's hard. As Sam so eloquently put it, if it wasn't hard, it would have been done already. Even the stuff you're learning in class is hard. I have gone out and searched and read stuff that suggests that we still don't have a cogent interpretation of what quantum mechanics means. So if you're interested in figuring out, like, how do you teach people this stuff? How do you get these incredibly esoteric and break the bounds of human intuition ideas into people's heads? Heckler does that. Andrew Heckler does that. Actually, one of our other officers, Ian Dela Cruz, works with him. Ian, unfortunately, couldn't be here today, but that is the work he does. So if email, I'll put that in chat too, spsohiostate@gmail.com. Yeah, no, and that I actually looked at that stuff for a little while. I decided it ultimately wasn't for me, but I did look at that stuff for a while because those are some hard. You want to ask what the real people who are trying to solve the hard problems? It's, figuring out how to teach this stuff.
All right. Well, for me, I have to go now. So, but thank you everyone for coming. So, see you later.
Yeah, we've hit 7:00, so I could field any final questions people might have, but otherwise, we can end this.
Nathan,
Yeah.
you know what's really dumb is that we didn't just make that email like last year. That would have been so easy.
Yeah, well.
Hindsight's 2020.
Well.
Yeah. Although I think the problem was that we wanted to do like a subscribers list like those company emails do.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever figured that out.
It's not a big deal, If it was possible for the good ideas to be had all at once, Newton wouldn't have left room for Einstein, wouldn't have left room for Feynman, wouldn't have left room for Dirac. So, and the legacy in mathematics is like 3 millennia longer than that. So, yeah, but we have the email now, and I want to encourage people to send it. But yeah, it looks like people are in general leaving because we've hit the end of our meeting. So for those of you who are still here, I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank our panelists for speaking. You guys have been fantastic. A little rambly, but complex answers to complex questions. And I wish y'all a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see y'all again next week. Thanks for coming. Bye.